Usually we do an in-person orientation, and so also usually we have the contracts out a lot earlier, so we appreciate your patience and flexibility in this process. A few housekeeping things. We are recording the presentation today so that we can send it out to people who might not be able to attend today. So just be aware that the presentation is being recorded. And there is a chat box that you can use if you have questions, if you just think of questions. We are trying to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So if you're listening by phone only, there is a copy of the slides that was sent with the invitation, so hopefully you can follow along there. And for everyone, even if you are able to view the slides, we suggest keeping the slides as a reference throughout the process because it might answer your questions that you might have in a couple of months down the road. At the end of the presentation, go ahead and sign the affidavit that says that you watched the presentation and return it to us with a copy of your signed contract. And one more note for trucks and buses. There might be a few other steps that aren't listed here that it will apply to trucks and buses, but we will go over that when we get you the truck and bus contract. Many of you do have a copy of your contract and so can follow along. For those of you who don't yet, we're working on trying to get those to you as soon as we can. So again, that's another reason why we provide a copy of the slides so you can refer to it later when you have a chance to review your contract. So we'll go ahead and get started. But basically, this is our orientation to go over what is in the grant agreement. So here I'm on slide 2 of the presentation. This is the people who work in the grants and incentives team. And so there, Kathy Kean, she's our supervisor, and then we have Robert Mercado, Ben Wong, I'm Heidi Gabriel Pack, Kim Impresso, who's also on the call, and Hugo Salgado. We are the people who you've probably been working with one of us throughout the process so far. And the contracts, you'll also be continuing to work with one of us as specified in the contract. Bergen and Andrea, they help out on the contracting side of things, and so they help out with reimbursement and getting the reports, so that's why they're included here. If you need to get in contact with any of us, our contact information is at the end of the presentation on that slide. So by way of overview of the agenda today, we're going to go over some the different project types because many of you have different types of projects. Some of you might have equipment replacement, whether it be replacing a tractor. Some of you might have marine vessels, so you're not replacing the marine vessel, you're repowering, you're replacing the engine that's in your vessel. Similarly, some of you will have off-road equipment that you're just replacing the engine. And others still are having infrastructure projects where maybe you're installing a battery charging facility or an alternative fueling facility. So we're going to go over the project types, and then we're going to go into the contract, starting with the recitals page, then continuing on with the highlights of the contract, the scope of work, and then also the status report that will be required. We'll go over that. We'll explain when to notify the district. We'll go over the process to get reimbursed for the grant amount. We'll go over some frequently asked questions, and then we have the contact list and questions at the end. So for project types, I've already kind of explained this, but if you have an equipment replacement, such as a tractor, you're going to be scrapping the old equipment the engine and the old equipment, and then getting a similar replacement. And I've already explained the repowers, you just have to scrap the engines. And then infrastructure, there's nothing to scrap because nothing is there. So you're just adding new facilities, new infrastructure. This is a page of the front page of the contract, what it will look like. It just explains who the contract is between the air district and you, your company, and then it goes over some recitals. One important note is that we do have the W-9 and 590 forms. You've mostly provided them already. So if by chance during this, until you get your new equipment and maybe your business address changes, then you would need to let us know, because we would use the address that's listed on the W-9 and the Form 590 to send the reimbursement check to. So we want to make sure that we get the reimbursement check to you as soon as possible. Let's see. I'm on slide 6 now. This is obviously what the W-9 looks like. Oops. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. And this is what the 590 looks like. For Article 3, that's the meat of the contract, really. We'll go over some important sections in Article 3. If you look through your contract and come to the first table, this is what it will look like. And this is what it's kind of just a table showing all your projects. So say you just have one project with us, replacing one tractor. It will look like this. It will have one row, and it will explain the application number, your unit number, that you're replacing it. This column for eligible costs, that's the costs from the quote that you had provided to us. The maximum grant is the maximum grant that we would pay. And the contractor match, that's the amount, if you take the eligible costs, you subtract the grant, that's what you're left with. So this column right here, the maximum program grant, that would be what the district would pay. And then contractor match, that would be what you would pay at the end of the process. So that's the first table. And if you have more than one, project, like say you have 3 tractors, each of those tractors would be listed on a separate row there. And sometimes people, I am sorry if we can't get, if we're having technical difficulties. Again, this is kind of our first time trying this Teams meeting. So, but Megan, I think that our IT person is going to be letting you in. Vanessa, I'm not sure if your screen says the file cannot be displayed. I'm not sure. We do have the copy of the PDF slides. Maybe you can click on that and follow along.
Yeah, I'm following off of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the table here. So again, if you have 3 tractors, you would have 3 lines. And then if you decided later on in the process, oh wait, I only want to replace 2 tractors, just be advised that each line is the maximum for that piece of equipment. So you can't say, oh, I'm going to use all, the money here and the totals to pay for 1 tractor. It's kind of self-explanatory, but I just wanted to be clear because sometimes people get confused about that. And be aware that there are some ineligible costs that are outlined in the guidelines. For example, for marine vessels, we would not pay for anything involved with the steering system, dry docking fees, for equipment replacement, like a tractor replacement. If you're getting extra buckets that weren't part of the original equipment that you had, we won't pay for those extra attachments. Okay, so the timing. Just know that you should not be purchasing or ordering your equipment before the contract is executed and the effective date. And where you will, the effective date is actually on the last page of the contract. So it should be page 24 of 24. And it explains that the effective date is the last date set forth on the signature lines. Since generally we have you sign the agreement first and then we send it to our air pollution control officer, for all intents and purposes, the effective date is going to be the date that our the air pollution control officer signs the agreement. So after he signs the agreement, then we will let you know. We'll send you a copy of the executed contract. Here's a copy of the signature page. You can see this circle right here on the lower left is where the contractor, the person who at your company is authorized to sign for the contract, would sign and date. And then our air pollution control officer would sign and date there, and this signature is the review by our county council.
Please enter your PIN.
All right, so this is the, I'm on slide 15 for those of you following along.
We're now joining.
Oh, sorry. Slide 14. These are the equipment replacement tasks. Just know that if you have a repower project, you're not going to be required to do all these tasks. But equipment replacement is the majority of the contracts that we have. So task 1 is before you order the new equipment, you find a salvage facility that will be able to destroy your equipment as specified in the contract and the guidelines. Step 2 would be once you've found that facility, then you can order the replacement equipment within 90 days of the effective date. So you can't order it before the contract is signed by both parties, but within 90 days of when the contract is signed by both parties, you have to order it. And also you have to take delivery within 90 days of that point. Note that in both of these tasks, there are provisions where the core, so the person at the district who is working with you, can give you extensions in writing. Task 4 is taking the existing equipment, so your original equipment, to the dismantler within 60 days of getting the new equipment. So you do have a 60-day window where you can technically have both pieces of equipment, and that's just to allow time to get the old equipment destroyed. But don't wait till the last minute, because the dismantler will need some time to dismantle the equipment. And then after the equipment is destroyed, then you would submit attachment B, which is also at the end of the contract. That has a section for you and the dismantler to sign, saying that the equipment was, when it was received, when it was destroyed, and you would submit that to us as well. Okay, this is the example for repower projects. As I said, we don't have so many tasks, but it gives you 3 of them are similar. So you have to order the equipment with a certain number of days, you have to begin installation within a certain number of days, and then you have to complete it within a certain number of days. Okay, for your infrastructure project, if you have a battery charging station or an alternative fuel, there's nothing to destroy, so your tasks look completely different, but they do focus on things like getting the required permits, from any building department that would need to issue a permit, and you have to design it and order it, install it, and those are listed in your contracts. So one important part of your contract is the part that lists the project personnel. There may be one or maybe two people. These are the people that are authorized to speak with us concerning your project. So make sure that you look at this, and if you agree that these are the people that you want to be able to speak to us on the contract, have them there. If there are other people you want to add, let us know and we can add them. So just let the person know that's working with you on the contract. Okay, so this would be the second table that you would find in the contract. And this second table lists all the equipment that we're talking about in the contract for that you're replacing. So for example, here, there are two pieces of equipment. One is a tractor, one is a rubber-tired loader. And this information is based on our pre-inspections, what we determined when we visited your facility and we took down the information for the engine, the serial number, the horsepower, the tier level. So we list that there because we want it to be clear. This is the equipment that we're talking about scrapping. Here is the example for the marine vessel repower. And it's similar, except, the engines are listed here. There's usually more than one engine that we're talking about with a marine vessel. Here's an off-road repower example. Similar, but of course, you're not going to be scrapping the whole vehicle. You're going to be scrapping the engine. And then some of you will have a column at the very end of, okay, so this is the third table on the contract. The third table talks about new equipment. This is the new equipment that you're going to get to replace the old equipment. And you're not tied to any manufacturer. So just know that. And most of your contracts will say 2020, like a 2020 engine year. And then it will say final tier 4 or electric if you're going electric. It will give you a horsepower. And if you, so you can basically, like for example, this person could get any tractor. While using this contract, it's not updated, but they could get any tractor that was a 2016 engine year up to 50 horsepower. That was a final tier 4 diesel engine. So just know that that information will be there for each of your projects. And here it gives that the percentage of operation in San Diego. Most of you will have 100% in this column for each of your pieces of equipment. But some of you, if you operate in more than one county, then it will be different. But this is what we based our calculations on. So some of you will have a column here for annual hours of use. If you do have a column there, then you have to, meet that as an average throughout the term of the contract. So the reason why you might have this column here is if you estimated your hours of use, determine the number of hours of use. So this column here, if you do have that, you have to really pay attention to make sure that you think you would be able to meet that, those hours on an annual basis, on an average throughout the term of the contract. Here's just the example for marine vessels. So in this one, the Titanic here, they're going to get 2 engines and they're going to be EPA Marine Engine Tier 3. But they're only going to be operating at 80% in San Diego waters. Again, there is an off-road repower example with the same table, similar table. For infrastructure equipment, there are certain specifications that are listed in the contract. The contract goes over this, so I'll just highlight it here. But for non-residential, must be a level 2 or higher battery charger. We don't have any light-duty charging stations this year. So the battery charger that I'm aware of must be certified by a nationally recognized testing laboratory, and there's a link there. Equipment maintenance. It's important to us, as it is to you, to properly maintain your equipment. It will last longer. and the emissions reductions will be in effect, for a longer period of time if the equipment is properly maintained. One important item to recognize is that besides being required to maintain the equipment and not tampering with the equipment, you'll see in red here, it says contractors shall maintain a properly operating non-resettable hour meter which accurately measures the number of hours the engine operates. So if some of you might not have had an operational, especially in the farm sector, might not have had an operational hour meter, but just know that now you would need to. On your new equipment, it has to be operational, and if it stops working, you have to get it repaired. Because that is how we determine the usage. Each year you'll be submitting usage reports, and that's how we would determine how effective the grant program is at reducing emissions. Okay, so I mentioned reports. So the section of your contract that talks about reports, there's two types of reports. And the first is just an initial report. It will be due in August. It's just going to provide us with an update of, hey, where you are in the process of getting your new equipment. And then the second type of report is an annual report, and it's going to be due each year until, in May, each year until your contract ends, basically. So just keep in mind that there's two separate reports, even though they're submitted on the same form, as I'll show you in a minute. Let's see. Also, just a note for infrastructure projects. If there's a problem with the infrastructure, then you have to report to the district as specified in the contract. We don't have any hydrogen stations this year. Okay, so battery charging, you have to report to the Department of Energy Alternative Fuel Data Center located at that link. Okay, so here is what Attachment A looks like. It is found directly after the signature page in your contract. So this section that's highlighted in red at the top here, for your initial report, which is due by August 31st of this year, you would check, oh, I'm submitting an initial report and I'm covering this time period. So the time period is basically, when the contract started through, August. And then you would include on this initial report the status of all of these tasks. So, hey, have you submitted have you found a salvage facility? Yes, I have. If you have, push complete and the date you did it. If you haven't yet, well, you would mark pending and the date that you think you're going to be completing that task. So the same for all the tasks on this page. One note for infrastructure, obviously there's no equipment to destroy. So that's the initial report, which is due by August. For the rest of the time of the contract, you would be submitting annual reports. So those are generally due in May. So as an example, say I was getting a tractor replacement contract this year, I would be submitting the initial report in August saying, hey, have I ordered my tractor yet? Have I found a person to destroy it? Explain that. That would be in August. And then in May of 2021, I would be submitting this report. And this annual report is your chance to explain the current hour meters reading and the percent that operated in San Diego during this reporting period. And then also list the equipment that you have. This box at the very bottom here is your chance to explain if you had hours, like a loss of work hours, and that affected the amount of time that you were able to use your equipment, you would be able to explain that here. Things such as the weather, there was a major maintenance issue that the equipment was down for several months, or, the coronavirus affected the usage because of X, Y, Z. So that's your chance to explain why the usage would be lower. We would review that when we get the annual report and know what was going on with that. So when would you notify us? Notify us when you get the new equipment or when you get it installed. We need to come out and look at the equipment to make sure the equipment matches what the specifications are in the contract. Notify us when you're ready to destroy the old equipment. We want to make sure it's the right one. Sometimes junkyards, they might you might accidentally send the wrong tractor to the junkyard. So we just want to make sure. Notify us after the equipment has been destroyed, and then we're going to come out and look at the old equipment, and then notify us if you have any problems during the process. We might be able to help. Okay, so this is the process to get reimbursed. As you probably know, the grant process is so you would pay for the cost of the new piece of equipment, and then we reimburse you after the contract requirements are satisfied. So that is essentially, we have the old equipment is destroyed, and the engine for sure, and then the equipment if you're doing an equipment replacement. And then we meaning the Air District, has looked at the new equipment or the new infrastructure, and we have all the documentation listed in the contract that's complete. So this is what a destruction inspection, this is what we're looking to see. These are some pictures of engines. You'll notice that there's a hole in the block here. This is the engine block. This hole extends all the way through the flange to the oil pan. This is the requirement that the hole go through both places. So this is what we would be looking to see. It's a jagged 3-inch diameter hole. We also will want to still verify the serial number, so the engine tag, don't get rid of that when you're destroying the engine. For tractors or equipment that's being replaced, we also need to see a cut to the frame of the equipment. So this is, for example, a tractor. It's been sawed in half, so that counts. Also note that the equipment tag is also still on the equipment, so we can verify that it's the same equipment. Here is what we would look for when we come and look at the new equipment. Very similar to what we looked at when we looked at your old equipment. So we would look at the equipment, make sure it runs, hopefully it does, and we would photograph the hour meter to get a baseline, and we would also record the photographs, the tractor tag, serial number tag, and the engine serial number tag. Your contract lists out the documents that are required for reimbursement, so I'm just going to kind of go over what they look like, but here is what the list is right here. So we would need, and I think it makes sense more to explain as we look at samples. So just know there's a list. Here's an example. This is the invoice form. This is also found at the very last page of your contract. This is where you invoice the district, and so you fill out this form with the new equipment here and the amount you paid, one line for each piece of equipment. Invoice number, you can put whatever number you want there, or whatever number your accounting department wants there. It doesn't matter to us, except that it just can't be the same one. Like say you submitted 2 invoices, it can't be the same number. Okay, so this is an example of what an invoice from the dealer looks like. So this person bought a tractor, and so it shows, the amount paid, and it's, there's an order date and a signature. So that's what that would look like. This is what an executive order would look like. Most of you would be providing an executive order from the Air Resources Board. because it's California certified engine. If you're marine engines, it's most likely going to be a certificate of conformity from the EPA. So, because the EPA regulates the marine engines. So it just will tell you the tier level of the engine. Okay, the insurance policy, there's a whole section in there on the insurance requirements, and this is insurance for the new equipment. So you can review that, but basically, it has to be of a major insurer, and then direct physical loss or damage insurance. And, a lot of these are terms of art used in the insurance agency, our industry, so your insurance agent should be able to, look at the requirements and get you what you need. One thing to point out is that the equipment has to be identified by serial number. Usually that's found on the schedule of property. Also, the Air Pollution Control District has to be a loss payee. That means if something happens to your equipment, that the Air District would also have an interest in the recovery. And one important note is that the policy must state that the policy would not be canceled without written notification to the district. So again, you can give the requirements in the contract to your insurance agent, and they should be able to provide you with the type of insurance that would be required. Infrastructure insurance is a little different. It also has to include other types of insurance because you're doing construction on the property. And one note, if it's an infrastructure project over $50,000, which it most likely is, the district has to be included on the UCC financing form. Okay, this is an example of the warranty coverage. And so, for example, an engine or equipment, it must have a 1-year warranty minimum or 1,600 hours. This document here shows this is a Kubota tractor, M series, so it has a warranty of 24 months that comes with it. Infrastructure projects are different, of course. The full factory warranty has to be at least 3 years for infrastructure projects. Okay, so attachment B. So I mentioned attachment B earlier, but attachment B is the document that your company, and also the dismantler would sign to show that, yes, we received this tractor with this serial number and this engine, on this date, and then, the replacement equipment for this tractor was received on this date by the owner. Then this tractor here was delivered to the dismantler on this date, and then it was destroyed on this date. So that is the form that is signed, and sent to us as part of the reimbursement process as well. This is an example of a salvage certificate showing that, this tractor was sent to salvage, or basically we want to make sure that the equipment is scrapped. And here it shows that the certificate must list the serial number of the engine and equipment. Okay, so here are some questions that we frequently get asked. Do you have to purchase the equipment that you submitted the quote for? No, you do not, but it must be like for like, and it has to match the specifications listed in the contract. As I explained before, it has to be, match that horsepower. It can't go over the horsepower unless you get permission in writing from the core of the contract. It has to be a final Tier 4 engine. Also in the contract, it talks about, and we'll go over this a little bit later, but it talks about the family emission limit standard. So it has to meet several items, but please contact the Corps if you have questions and you want to get something that is different that you did not submit as part of your quote. So if you got a violation from the APCD or CARB, would that affect your grant? It could. So just be sure and contact us, because you might have to, if you have not gotten reimbursed yet, you might have to correct the violation and work with compliance to resolve that violation before we would be able to reimburse you. If you've already gotten reimbursement, but we're talking like it's later in the contract period, also contact us. We might have to ask for a part of the grant amount if you're not able to get into compliance. But certainly, if that happens, that you got a violation, just let your Corps know, and then they can, he or she can figure out work with compliance to find out what we would need to do. Okay, so is your horsepower slightly over or under the horsepower listed? Is that an issue? The reason why it might make a difference is if there's the 25% buffer. So say you had a 100 horsepower existing engine and you wanted to get a 150 horsepower new engine, that is over 125%. So it's over the 125 horsepower that would be allowed. So please contact your Corps if you want to get equipment that does not match what is specified in the contract. It could mean that you would be reimbursed less because the cost effectiveness is based on the horsepower that you had said you were going to get. Okay, so say you gave us a quote and it was for $100,000, and then you go to the dealer to purchase the equipment and they say, oh, today it's on sale, it's only going to cost $50,000. So does that change your grant amount? It most likely would, because the district cannot pay more than, in the case of like a farm tractor, we cannot pay more than 80% of your cost. So even though in the contract it might have said, if we were going with a $100,000 tractor, it might have said you would get $80,000. If you only paid $50,000, we could only pay up to 80% of that amount. So also we've seen in the past where the reason why it's a good deal is because it's not the right engine tier. So that's another reason why we want to make sure that you're getting the right tier for your for the piece of equipment. And which leads us to this question: how do we know what tier it is? It's shown on the engine family label. The engine family is 12 characters, and it does explain in this code what the engine model year is, what the engine manufacturer is, the engine type, engine size, and then I think these are random. So that's a code that is worked out with EPA. And these are some examples. So you can see this engine family is found on all these emission labels. So what we would do is look at the engine family name. Then we would find the executive order. We would match it up and see right here. I know it's really hard to see, but here in this one, for this engine family, it says Tier 4 Final. This is an example of a certificate of conformity. So, here's a better picture. So this engine family number on the piece on the engine matches this document right here. And if we look in the emissions information here, we can see it's a Tier 4 Final. And there's a nuance here with family emission limits. We would want to make sure that it is a true Tier 4 Final engine. Sometimes EPA lets engine manufacturers average the emission limits across a family. So even though maybe that model engine would be higher than the Tier 4 final, the whole family, if you average it out, it works out. However, for purposes of our grant program, the grants really are supposed to get the cleanest engines available. So we need to make sure that that kind of averaging is not happening. So this is how we would do that. We would make sure that if there's a family emission limit and it's greater than the standard, then we would not consider it a Tier 4 final. If there's a family emission limit and it's less than the standard, then we're good to go. So I know it's a little nuanced, but you can always double check with your core to make sure. We've already done evaluations on the quotes, the engine family quotes that you had given us. But again, if you're getting something different, it's important to ask us to do that analysis just to make sure that you would be good to go. Okay, sometimes people sell their equipment and so their contract is still ongoing, but they want to sell the equipment. Please contact us because if you're still under contract to perform those emissions reductions, then we would need to maybe have the new owner take on the responsibilities of the contract. Or maybe you might have to reimburse the district for the amount of the years that are left in the contract. So please contact us before making any ownership changes. Say that the business is affected and you're not able to use the equipment as much as you thought you were going to be able to use it. Please contact us. Again, you do the annual reports to explain to us what the usage is, but if you're having trouble meeting those the normal usage for your equipment, let us know and we can possibly have some suggestions for you. Here is some contact information, as I said, for the people on the team, and some of us do speak Spanish too. And it gives also our normal work hours, emails, and here, if you need to visit the Air District website, there's our link there, and also the Carl Moyer program website, there's the link there. Summer, maybe early fall. So if you are not already signed up to receive our notifications, please sign up, and then you can apply again. Okay. So that concludes our presentation. Does anyone have any comments or questions? I do
have a question. Sorry.
Okay.
As far as destroying the equipment, does that also include the tires and everything, or because we're going to do a farm tractor, would we be able to keep the tires, or does that have to go also?
You can double check with your core, but my recollection is that I think the tires are okay to keep, but double check with your core.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Leo, you had a question.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
I can. How are you, Leo?
Good, good. Yeah, thanks for putting this on. Appreciate it. Some of it's review for me because I've sat through it before. Some updates, good information. One question is on the vehicle grants. So for CNG powered engines, and then also the all-electric vehicle grants. Is there a restriction on the financing for these units? If the company was to want to finance, I heard, and I didn't see it in writing, but maybe I missed it, is that APC is no longer permitting leasing agreements with the equipment, the vehicles, but is a loan from a bank for the remaining balance, not for the entire amount, but we come out of pocket and we pay for everything up front, And then when the dust settles, we like to consider, based on this current economy, we like to at least consider financing the balance after we get the the reimbursement back. So we're not financing the total amount, including the grant, but less the grant money per truck to finance the balance owed on that unit. Is a loan acceptable for that equipment?
Okay, so you're asking if you can get a loan for the cost of the equipment?
For the actual asset itself, for the truck itself, yes.
Yeah, so if you're getting a loan for to pay for the asset, then you would want to submit the financing documents as part of your reimbursement packet. So we can just be aware that that it's being financed. Does that make sense?
Yes, we did that before, but I know our last grants were 2016, and we actually did a lease agreement on those. Typically, we end up owning them, and there's a little residual buyout at the end of the 5-year lease. But we submitted all that on that grant, and that was acceptable. But I had just heard that leasing as a form of financing is no longer acceptable. If it is, then we would probably lean towards like a track lease, like a 15-20% residual. And like I say, I mean, we're usually you would be past the amount of time that we have to keep that vehicle and report on it at the 5-year point anyways. But we typically buy out everything we lease. We pay it off earlier, end up buying it out. So is there a differentiation being made between the type of financing, whether it's leasing or loan, or are both those acceptable?
Leo, are you talking about, you mentioned trucks, are you talking about GMERP or Moyer?
So this is not for the infrastructure side of things. This is for the actual GMERP truck grants.
Okay, so yeah, so for the GMERP program, I'm not as familiar. I would suggest asking Ben about that one.
Okay, my apologies. On the invite, it seemed like they were kind of merged together as far as the description.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, it's just, I'm sorry, I just don't know the answer to the question on that one because I'm
I'll
not.
follow up with them separately. No worries.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, Alex from TY Nursery. I think you had a question.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Alex.
My question is, can we start dismantling the tractors now, or do we have to wait for the contract to be signed and sent back?
You should wait for the contract to be signed. Just wait for everything to be like official, just to mitigate your risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so the only thing when we do turn in the contract, the only thing I need is the owner or is the signature, and then we'll wait for your signature, and then the rest of the paperwork comes when compensation time, right?
Yeah, except for the initial report. So that attachment A, you would be submitting in August. So depending on, I'm not sure if you guys are gonna like order right away, but just remember that. So you get the final contract. The next thing is you need to tell us in attachment A, the initial report, hey, what's the status of everything that you're doing? And then maybe you get, I don't know if that will be before or after you get your new tractors. So,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Tom Gardner, you have a question. Hi, Tom. See. Tom, I think you might be muted.
Oh yeah, I took it off. So we can send in scanned copies of,
Yes,
of the signed contract?
Yes.
Okay.
This year, I know previously we needed the original wet ink signature, but we're doing, that's been changed. So.
Okay, cool.
Yep. All right, let's see. I'm just looking to see if anyone else has a question. Let me look at the chat box. I don't see any questions in the chat box. So, okay. Are there any other questions that anyone has? All right. Hearing no questions and seeing no raised hands. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our first virtual presentation for our contracts. And again, as a reminder, be sure and sign the form that shows that you attended the presentation and send that back to us along with the copy of the signed contract. Please let your core know. The core is listed at the on that signature page too, just in case you're not sure who that is. And let the core know if you have other questions, and good luck with your projects. Thanks so much for coming today.